Hello, my name is Anna Pochmara, and I teach American literature at the Institute of English Studies at the University of Warsaw. Today I will talk to you about some images, and first let me start with a presentation of the images. Right, so have a look at the picture. We could talk about pop culture, we could talk about American-British relations, we could talk about British royalty today, but I would like to have a look at something different. So I will talk about race in American society, and I will discuss some paradoxes related to it. The image that I begin with comes from the popular TV series Suits. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. I found the series funny only for a couple of episodes and I stopped watching. The image that you can see here represents a character called Rachel Zane. And it turned out later that I missed out on something important. A change of racial identity of Rachel, one of the main characters. In season 2 of the show, the writers introduced Rachel Zane's father, who, as you can see in the picture, is a visibly African-American person. Some viewers were actually shocked to discover that Rachel Zane is a Black character. I probably would be quite surprised. A similar surprise reaction was involved in the royal romance of the actress who played Rachel, Meghan Markle. When her engagement to Prince Harry was announced, people wished them a lifetime of happiness, and the issue of racial differences between them was not really commented very widely. The fact that Meghan is biracial, however, was commented on when her mother, Doria Ragland, appeared at the wedding ceremony. For many, it came as a shock that Meghan was not white. The issue made it to the headlines again during the highly publicized interview conducted by Oprah Winfrey with Harry and Meghan, and their alleged concerns of the British royalty regarding the skin color of their babies. Harry and Meghan's relationship is not the first to evoke controversial reactions. Interracial marriages aroused controversies also in the past. Here you can see Walter White and Gladys Powell White, a married couple of early 20th century intellectuals. You can probably guess that this was also an interracial marriage. Actually, they were quite lucky they came from the north of the states because in some southern states, such marriages were illegal until 1967. Yes, 1967. When the whites, who you can see in the pictures, mentioned that they were an interracial couple, most people assumed that Gladys was the one who was African American, and I bet you thought so as well. In fact, it was Walter White who had some traceable amount of black blood, that is, some African American ancestors, obviously by far outnumbered by white ancestors. Yet, according to the early 20th century definitions of race in the US, this made him black. He accepted that, and as you can see, he became one of the most important writers, intellectuals, and activists. Black writers, black intellectuals, and black activists. His case is probably the most vivid, with his name being white. But actually, the majority of the black intelligentsia at that time looked quite white to us. Europeans would look quite white to us. Today, because of the one-drop rule, which is no longer legally embraced, still the African American community is the most visibly varied of racial groups in the United States. Many of African Americans would not be really regarded as black, for example, in Poland. And here you can see the diversity. I'm sure that you can recognize some of the people in the pictures even better than I can. So what's the point here? Why am I showing all those pictures of celebrities? Well, the point is to talk about racial identity. The case of Meghan Markle's and Walter White's blackness very aptly supports today's scientific approaches to race. As you can see here in the quotation from an American scholar, Haney Lopez, there are no genetic characteristics possessed by all blacks, but not by non-blacks. Similarly, there is no gene or cluster of gene common to all whites, but not to non-whites. Another scholar puts it even more bluntly. Anyone who continues to believe in race as a physical attribute of individuals, despite the now commonplace disclaimers of biologists and geneticists, might as well also believe that Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy are real, and that the Earth stands still while the sun moves. Race must be viewed as a social construction, that is, human interaction rather than natural differentiation must be seen as the source and continued basis for racial categorization. That is, what does it actually mean? It means that who we define as black or white does not really depend on their genes, but on our social and cultural ideas of race. Walter White in Poland in the 1920s would not be spontaneously classified as black. Neither, for that matter, would be Meghan Markle today. Our ideas about three races, actually, white, black, and yellow, go back to the Middle Ages, when European imagination only encompassed Europe, Africa, and some part of Asia. The division, here embodied in the figures of the three magi, was imposed on all ethnic groups encountered since then. But even though race is a social and not biological category, it does not mean that it is not real, because racialized thinking has very real, very powerful social consequences. Although with the election of Barack Obama, some announced the beginning of the post-racial era, an era when race no longer matters, the events you can see here in the picture, the events that we all witness at the dawn of the 21st century, prove otherwise. Black Americans today still experience the result of systemic historical oppression, which was legal throughout most of American history. After the terrors of the slavery era, which lasted over 100 years after the founding of the United States, not to mention before, came the less obvious to people in Poland, perhaps era of racial segregation. Legally embraced racial segregation, which prevented Black people from equal professional and educational opportunities, but also they could not satisfy their very basic needs, such as public restrooms. One of the most visible results of racialized thinking today is racial profiling, which together with law that discriminates against African Americans leads to violence against Black citizens and their higher incarceration rates. As you can see, only 1 in 17 white men, only 1 in 17 white men will statistically end up in jail. For Black males, the statistic is staggering. It is 1 in 3 men. Black women, on the other hand, are the lowest paid demographic in the US, and they are paid only 61 cents for every dollar paid to white men. African American situation has improved since the days of slavery and segregation, but it is still far from equal, and the promise of the post-racial era is not yet fulfilled. So this is the end of my short presentation, and now let's have a look at some questions. So the question about the one-drop rule. Because of the so-called one-drop rule, all people with any traceable ancestry that was not European were classified as Black. All people with any traceable African ancestry were classified as Black, or all people with visible African ancestry were classified as Black. The correct answer is number 2. And this rule would include also people such as Walter White, blonde people with blue eyes. Legally, racial segregation in public schools ended in 1954 with the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education. Marriages between Black and white people were illegal in some states until 1967. Racial differences can be proved with today's research in genetics. This is false. The notion that humankind can be divided along white, black, and yellow lines is based on physical differences between people, dates back to the Middle Ages, and proves that our ideas about race are socially constructed, is incorrect because it misses the red race. It dates back to the Middle Ages, and it proves that our ideas about race are socially constructed. And this is the end of the test and my presentation. Thank you very much.